going to turn 29 years old next year. 29 years old. And if you're not a little bit concerned about that number, then you don't follow the history of the NBA. 30 seems to be kind of a number that seems to kind of start to get to players. And for a guy like Joel Embiid, man, not to have ever played in a conference final or an NBA championship game, it is mind-boggling because you see the talent that he is. I mean, you put him up there with Luka, you put him up there with Giannis, with Kevin Durant, you put him with the absolute top-level talents in the NBA. And for him not to have an Eastern Conference final, granted, there's other factors that come at play. But I thought that the Sixers, for 2 straight years now under Doc Rivers, were at least positioned to get there, if not the NBA Finals. And I thought that Doc Rivers just did a terrible, terrible job managing their postseason expectations, which turned out to be the case against Miami and Atlanta as well. So
certainly. Thiago, if I was to grant you access to the Sixers in terms of being at their practices and being on the coaching staff more or less, and let's say that Doc Rivers really trusted your advice, what would you tap on his shoulder and tell him something that he needs to do different as a head coach?
Well, first of all, after this article, I don't think that's going to happen.
Fair enough. Well, let's fish a wish for a second. I think he could use all the help he can get. But let's just say in this fantasy that you could give him some advice. What's something that you see him doing that just leaves you dumbfounded?
Well, I kind of touched on the article a couple of things. I think that throughout the regular season, Doc has a weird way of boxing himself into a corner. So he relies a lot on his veteran play, right? We talked about DeAndre Jordan and some of the other veteran guys have come through the system through Doc Rivers. And in this particular season, we saw backup center being a massive problem for them throughout the whole year, especially when they traded away Andre Drummond. So going into the year and going to the postseason, I didn't think he had a coherent plan around who to play behind Joel. And we talked about Paul Reed, for instance. Paul Reed showed that he can play. I mean, in this limited number of minutes that he had in the regular season, it worked out okay, but you just didn't get a sense that he was fully ready for the moment. And I thought that him not playing throughout the regular season and only doing like mop-up duties kind of put the Sixers at a disadvantage, especially when Joel went down. Because at that point, now you're relying on Paul Reed, not for 5 to 10 minutes, but for 15 to 20 minutes. And you kind of tell that he's just not that type of player yet. But throughout the regular season, he showed that he could be that player. So it's just the over-reliance on veterans. I mean, we talked about Tyrese Maxey last year, played less than 200 minutes in the postseason. The guy is a bona fide star. I mean, he's going to be a star. You can clearly tell. And him not being able to play, especially with Ben Simmons struggling the way he was last year, all that seems to kind of come back around on Doc Rivers. And I truly think, man, if he does not change his mindset around that, the Sixers are going to be caught again next year in the postseason, just the way that this seems to work out.
When it comes to Joel Embiid and not wasting his prime, that's kind of one of the things that I feel like the Sixers are doing right now. You mentioned 29 years old, and Doc Rivers gets the huge responsibility, just as those other GMs that have come across have had that huge responsibility of not wasting this guy's prime. What is it the Sixers could be doing? I know that in the article you point out, and this was what absolutely blew my mind, the pick and roll offense and ISO offense. During the regular season, good on the pick and roll. Postseason, completely inverted. It was all ISO. Why go and make that change in the playoffs when it comes to the style of play that was actually working for you in the regular season?
I mean, Mark, that is a staple of Doc Rivers, man. That goes back to way back the Clipper days. It's one of the reasons I thought they've consistently failed as a team in the postseason, going to that ISO style ball. That is a Doc Rivers staple. To your point, I don't think it makes any sense. We saw Joel and Harden pick and rolls. It was a nearly unstoppable play. And for some strange reason, it just goes back to isolation basketball. I talked about on the article 2 MVP level years from Joel Embiid, and you don't even have a top 10 offense in the NBA. That's nearly unheard of. And it goes back to not shooting enough three-point shots, not playing with enough pace. And it's kind of inexcusable, man. I mean, this is the new NBA. If you think that you're just going to live through Joel Embiid in the post and playing, shot clock offense, you're not going to win any championships, man. And we're seeing that with Doc Rivers for 2 straight seasons now. It is concerning because you don't see a willingness to change. I mean, unless you see something differently, it's the same narrative after every game that, we just didn't move the ball around or whatever. It's like, nah, man, you need to be doing better as a coach, period.
Yeah.